Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of The Servant Aftershow, presented by the Hollywood Critics Association. My name is Heather Wixson, and I am joined this week by Rick Hong. It's just the two of us this week, Rick. But
Yeah, but it's
quite
fine.
an
Hey, but it's fine
episode.
because this is a great episode. Because, like I think last week we kind of hit the top of the peak. Maybe even the week before, we kind of hit the top of the peak of the roller coaster. And now it's starting to, we're definitely over the peak. Or this episode was like definitely the part where the adrenaline starts going. And I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in this specific episode 6.
Actually 7. Don't forget.
7. Sorry,
7,
that's right.
Camp.
That's right.
Yes, we're doing episode 7, which is called Camp. Kit, last week when we had her on the show, she teased us a little bit that we were going to be busting through with a lot of things for this episode. And she was not wrong, because there is a whole lot going on in this episode. And I don't know about you. I always have a tendency to sort of start at the end of the show when we do these. But that last 5 minutes of this episode, like I rewatched it about an hour ago, and like my heart is still racing, because that was so incredibly stressful, and holy crap. But I don't know how you felt, but I was just like jaw on the floor.
Well, I was amazed at how fast her power worked.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really get a parameter of Leanne's power, like its reach and everything else too. So I didn't so just to see how fast, just like her just sitting on the porch, and all of a sudden all the chaos can happen in the house. I was thinking maybe, okay, well, if she gets to the train station or the bus station or wherever she's at, and then she gets a little bit farther, whatever, then maybe something, like to that effect of what we saw with Jericho was going to happen. But I didn't expect her power just to be just a snap. I mean, just sitting on that porch, just like kind of saying like, okay, hey, you know what? You guys want to try to do something to me? This is what I'm going to do to you right now before I'm even like in a car heading to where you want to send me.
Yeah. Do you feel like this is sort of establishing Leanne as kind of a villain now? Because I think it's interesting, because this is the first episode where we're seeing her really kind of be aggressive in a lot of ways, especially even before everything that sort of happens at the end of the episode. Like she's talking down to Dorothy. She's just kind of really dismissive of a lot of things. And I'm just kind of like, are we building up towards Leanne the villain? Because I've always really liked her, and she's such an integral part of this family for obvious reasons, especially after this episode. But boy, oh boy, she is kind of on a little bit of a tear these days.
Well, I think it's a couple things, when it comes to Leanne. I said, like, when I talked to her I had my interview with her, and I talked to Nell Tiger Free. It's interesting, like Leanne is this like sweet character. Sometimes she's sexy, as we've seen how she kind of seduces the dudes and everything, and it kind of gets touched on in this episode for sure because of what happened last episode. But she's also scary. And, that's like the one thing I was like saying, she's also scary. And I think one of the reasons we're kind of starting to see her, as you say, become the villain, maybe becoming a little bit more scary, is a combination of two things. Because now she kind of has that tribe that's pushing her and kind of worshiping her. So she's kind of like saying like, oh, more than just myself in my brain and all these things. It's like, I'm finding that I have a power and I have a following. I want to say it's like those damn influencers. Try as hard as they must. They're insecure when they do or whatever, and then all of a sudden they start getting the more followings, the blue ribbons, the K's. All of a sudden, it's like you're starting to see like these obnoxious, stupid videos that you're just kind of like, why? Why do people want, like, why are 100,000 people watching this person? Sit there and just hit a baseball bat or whatever stupid things that they decide to do. So I think that's a part of it, but it's also kind of the dynamic of what's going on with Dorothy. And I think Dorothy herself is kind of causing a little bit, she's causing a little bit of that, there's something there, like a little bit of the chaos. It's like the conflict that's within her is the issue of why, like, we're seeing maybe a little bit more of like that evil and, from Leanne. And it's like you said too, I mean, like, maybe this is the thing. Maybe this is the thing for the end of the season and all next season. In season 4, the final season, is that the whole thing is that this sweet girl that got brought in as a nanny that had this like troubled, mysterious background becomes the villain.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me too, in that respect, because we've seen the footage of Leanne as a little girl who was so idolizing Dorothy, and then season two, season one was just them kind of working out their back and forth and stuff, and then season two is Dorothy, abusing Leanne. A lot of the instances, which is interesting because like now you kind of see like she had this power. It's like she just sort of let Dorothy do these things. And it's kind of curious. Like now I'm kind of going, why? Like, cause you literally could have put a stop to this at any point. And now she's just like, boom, like she is like thriving in this power. And I think it's interesting because you talked a little bit about sort of the homeless kids cult. And there's that line that she says to Sean when they're about to eat dinner, where he's like, what is this interaction with you guys? And she's like, oh, they want to learn from me. And then it said something like, well, maybe they look up to you. And she's like, well, maybe I deserve it or something.
Yeah, right. I know. And it's so kind of like, right, because like the cuts that we get aren't necessarily subtitled like everybody else gets to watch. So like as we're watching it, or at least my edit of the show that I get to have, it's kind of mumbled. Like I had to actually like go back, rewind, play it, turn up the sound just a little bit, because when she said, I deserve it, I almost thought she said like something servant. And I was like, oh, now they're referring to kind of the title of the show. So I had to rewind it again and it's like, yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, how many people sit there when someone's talking about somebody and says, and like they tell you, it's like, well, Heather, I deserve it. It's like, it's a kind of a cocky, obnoxious thing to say, to tell somebody like, I deserve it. Usually you tell somebody else. It's like, well, you deserve it. You deserve this. Like someone else tells it to you. You don't sit there and say like, I deserve it, or something to like that magnitude of kind of this situation. I deserve it. It's obnoxious. It's kind of cocky.
Yes, my dog got really excited about the idea of this too. And it's funny too, because like even in the work that we're in, like I'm still somebody who like struggles just to like promote the stuff that I do.
Yeah, me too.
So I was like, oh, she is really owning her power in this episode in some really, really huge ways. And the way that she's able to wield that power, sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly, is really interesting. And I also thought it was interesting that they brought the diary back into it in this episode, because that was something Dorothy gives her to kind of get her to open up more. It ultimately becomes like this like little book of Leanne's twisted affairs in a way, and
her scary stories to tell in the dark. See, like that's like, so if everybody is listening, watching, Heather and I were talking about things that we kind of get sometimes from the studios or whatever, but like that would be one that I would like to see the booklet of just the drawings, or whatever. Like that would be something that I'd like to keep. So Apple TV Plus, if you happen to be watching, M. Night Shyamalan, if you happen to be watching, hey, that's a good idea to send out as like an FYC. Think about us for Emmy season. But yeah. What I like about that booklet too is I'm trying to figure out, is that like she's done it after the fact, or is it a little bit of foreshadowing? Like she's already kind of, or like we saw with the, because like I want to say, because even in that episode where we saw like all the check mark things, like I wasn't,
with
like
Julian,
the way
that was happening in the moment.
So right, so is that what's going on with this log, this type of thing, or like is this something that she wants to happen? And because like most of the stuff I was thinking, it's like, ooh, it could be like the way that I was looking at some of the pictures is that it could be that she's drawing them in there, and then some weird thing happens. Except the fact that when they had the one with Dorothy and the lactating, and that one was so descriptive in the drawing that I was like, maybe not. Like, I mean, so I was like, maybe not. Maybe this is after the fact that she just kind of likes to draw this in there. But as Dorothy discovers it in her snooping, it is disturbing. I would be very disturbed if I knew that I had a nanny or a caretaker or somebody that, I think even if I had family, like a child or something, and they had like this like weird book of drawings, like I would be disturbed.
Yeah. It's funny too, because it gave me like these flashbacks to like high school, because I had a diary when I was in high school and my mom totally read it and I got in a lot of trouble. And I was
really?
just like,
yeah, that is such an invasion.
I know, because it was before I was supposed to be like, because I wasn't allowed to technically date till I was 16, but I was still dating anyway. And of course, like me writing all these things out, and my mom was just like,
Oh.
and she broke it because it had a lock on it. And she broke
Yeah,
into
I know,
it.
right? It's just like, I mean, granted, like those locks that on the diary things, like it's not like it's like that,
Yeah, she
it's not
pried like the back page part off and stuff, so the lock was still locked and everything. And I was like, oh, I should have
it's
realized.
not, yeah, it's not master lock, right?
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because we even reinforced the idea that in this episode that Leanne is 18, and it's like she's been so good and level-headed up until this point, but she's 18 too, on top of all this. So she's going through these like monumental, like transitionary changes in her life where like, when you're 18, you think you know everything, you challenge your authority. And she never really had the chance to do that. And now suddenly it's like Dorothy has become like target number one, which I think is really interesting because of the relationship that Leanne has or had with her own mom, where obviously that seemed to be a not so great situation for Leanne. And it's almost like she's kind of using some of that and pushing that towards like her relationship with Dorothy now. I mean, to be honest though, if some woman tortured me for months on end and kept me in their attic, I don't even know that I would have been nice enough to return their baby to them, but at some
Right.
point either. But yeah, like this is the first time I've really seen Dorothy like actually shaken to like in a way we haven't seen before. Like we've seen her in the aftermath of what happened to Jericho. We saw her last season just trying to get Jericho back, but there was like this sort of dogged determination to it. And this was just pure desperation and like a total freak out. So I thought that
Maybe
was really interesting.
maybe what the thing with Dorothy is that in season one it's yeah, she's just completely out of it, and and she's just trying to adjust. Everybody's kind of catering to Dorothy or whatever, and then in season two, right, she's distracted because Jericho disappears. So she's
Yeah.
like, where is he? Like whatever, and that's why. And she's taking out her frustrations, her anger, like like a little bit on Leanne. And in this season, and this is kind of the switch that we're seeing. We've even seen this conversation, but in season three, we see that we see like maybe a content Dorothy. She's like, okay, my baby is home now. I'm happy, whatever. But now my fulfillment is about my career. So now, so like at the beginning of this season, we see her kind of concentrating, trying to get her career back or whatever. And then she's had a couple like mishaps with it. So it's like maybe like that's not happening for her. So now maybe she's kind of going back and saying, like, well, then I need to focus on my child. And maybe, yeah. And so like now she's like focusing on her child, but because like Leanne's rebellion and because of what she saw on the camera, she's she's like becoming like even overly protective mother, and that's like it's like I said, it's like she doesn't have places to channel her energy. So now this is where she wants to channel her energy, is to like start combating with Leanne. That's like I was trying to talk about before, and I think that's what's happening here. That's what's triggering Leanne.
Yeah. I will say though, living in like a post-COVID world though, like if I was a mother and somebody took my baby to a park and like started handing it around to a bunch of random strangers, I'd be like, oh no, 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 no. I don't care how safe you think they are. Like you can't just hand out a child to strangers anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, like I mean, and that's the kind of the interesting thing about this specific episode too, is the whole like, yeah, they're whole. I mean, like there's like a bigger kind of social thing, like they're homeless, and they're not necessarily like kind of like the way that we normal probably see like certain homeless people, like mentally ill or like out of work or whatever. They're homeless because they left like this weird cult to follow Leanne. So like, yeah, they don't, maybe they're not as kempt, they're not as clean or like whatever. So the way that Dorothy views them is like they're these dirty homeless people or like whatever. But with Leanne, it's just like, no, 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 these are my people. These are my people. They just happen to be here outside, and they have they look a little bit maybe like they're homeless, but they're kind of like really not. And that's what I'm saying. Like I agree with you. It's like, right, it's just like if you take a baby out there and you don't know, and like, right, post-COVID world, and like we don't know what the world is there for them at this point in time in the world of servant. But right, like taking a baby to anywhere near to any of these types of areas, it's like is a big no-no.
Yeah. I mean, even if they were like well-dressed, upkept business people and you're handing them up, I'd still be like, no, let's just keep the baby, in here. But I think it's interesting because it makes me now question, some of the things that we've seen and sort of assumed about this cult. The more that we see Leanne starting to come into this power more and we see this dynamic shift, like, do you think Uncle George and Aunt May, do you think they were trying to protect Dorothy and Sean and their family from her? Like, do you think that they saw her as a potential threat, or were they motivated by something more selfish? It's so interesting to me because now I almost feel like as we get into this season, it makes the other two seasons contextually very different, where I'm like, I could go back and watch all of it again and probably get new things to take away from it.
Oh, 100%. I agree with you on that one too. And yeah, you could be right, because the big thing is like their world is still a mystery to us. And I think that's something that really needs to be unraveled in season 4 if they're not able to kind of do it in these like next 3 episodes, which I don't think that they will be. But I think it's like maybe like in something in season 4 before they get to the end. And I wouldn't even mind seeing no, I guess they could do it in 10 episodes, and I know like Apple doesn't really break the rule too much, but like, or even if you have maybe like a little bit of a longer finale and kind of like maybe the front chunk is try to explain to us the rules of Leanne's, cult or like whatever thing, in terms of how everything works and kind of who she is. So yeah, I think you're right. Like and it's also kind of like what you said prior about her becoming the villain. Maybe that's where all this is taking us to, is how is this family who welcomed this sweet innocent girl in, combat this like evil higher power, and now she has her people with her too. It's not just her, but she has her people, and from all of that, then what happens to this baby Jericho baby that doesn't really exist?
That to me was like, I want to talk a little bit about sort of what ends up being the catalyst for that. But I have to tell you, like, because we've had the actual babies back in rotation, like the image of Dorothy holding the doll again actually made me gasp. And I don't know if it was just sort of like this internal reaction of like, just, I knew it was coming because Leanne is gone.
Yeah, of course.
And there's something bad is going to happen. But there was just something that when seeing Dorothy standing there with the baby, just the doll, just like dangling from her hand, like I actually gasped. And I have to give them credit because it's like, I feel like, you know this because you cover stuff just as much as I do. Like sometimes it's not easy to make you like surprised or have an actual reaction. But there was something about the moment, like where I was just like, oh, I was like, oh no, we're doing this again. But I don't know what the hell Dorothy was thinking with this whole dance academy thing, but obviously very, very bad decision. And of course that brings Vera back in, who now I'm guessing is on her way out officially because of Julian's reaction to the whole situation.
Okay, well, so Vera being in the story, and it's cool to see Sunita Mani in this situation too, because she's like every kind of thing that she's kind of handled has been with her characters there's been a little comedy or whatever, but here there's like definitely like a lot more drama. And it's do we think though too that with Julian and there's Vera, like they were already kind of as it was referred to, like I think it was like in the last episode, the episode before, where it's just like, oh, she's off, like where is she? Oh, she's off doing something. But then as we saw, and it was a big deal to Dorothy, is Julian having sex with Leanne. So I don't know if that's more of even more of like him pushing Vera away, or like there's even more friction from that as well for her to be on the outs, because he's kind of back on the ins with Leanne.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think Sean and Julian are just trying to keep Leanne happy because I think they're clued into exactly what she's capable of, to most of the degrees of what she's capable of, which ultimately I think is Jericho and Jericho's existence, where Dorothy is still a little clueless. She's still, we saw her in this episode say about like, gosh, I can't remember, Sean being a part of, oh gosh, why do I keep forgetting the gourmet gauntlets? And she's like, I still can't remember. It's got to be baby brain, where they know like if Leanne gets pissed or Leanne gets pushed away, that's going to mean bad things for this family. And ultimately that's going to put Dorothy on a really dark path. So it was really interesting to see both of them react the way that they did. Because, ultimately, they want Jericho to be there, but they know they're also trying to protect Dorothy at the same time. But I have to say, Julian's got to work on his language when it comes to talking about people he's intimate with, because the way he talks about Vera, about like giving, I think it was like blowjobs for Sudafed. I was like, oh no, you don't bring that up during. No, I don't.
And that's what I'm trying. That's what also like what I'm just kind of trying to say too. It's just like now that he kind of he's in the clutch of Leanne again, and her weird power, that, like I said, that sexiness or whatever, that seductressness, like things that she has is, it gives him like kind of just to maybe even push Vera more away by like adding these like little jabs. He's adding these little jabs and they're low blows. And she clearly brings that up of saying like, why are you saying this? It's like, that's really uncool.
Yeah. Like, I think there's a part of Julian who wanted this relationship. I think there was something, because there's a genuine sort of affection that we see from them early, like in that first episode of the season. But I think ultimately he realizes like Leanne is Leanne, and he's got to kind of play by her rules more so than he gets to go out and sort of live his own life. So I think Julian's, because he's just so Julian sometimes, where he's just like, he just can't help himself. But it's interesting because it's like, at this point, like Leanne's hold is so much beyond just Dorothy and Sean's life and Jericho's life. Like now she's controlling Julian. And I'm curious if it's going to continue with Toby as well. Because we saw them, we
definitely saw Toby come back in, right? And he was already trying to build a relationship back up with her, right, a couple episodes ago. I mean, the thing about Sean, is I think now, like I think another part of it is that like, well, like Leanne's kind of maybe the balance to the household, because before Leanne showed up, like that was clearly like, as I was saying, and we've talked about this, that it was Julian and Sean on eggshells around Dorothy because, they had this like fake baby for Dorothy. And then, then all of a sudden the baby comes back, but then it leaves Leanne to be very mysterious. And they kind of understand on some end that in order for Leanne to be here, or in order for like the baby to be here, then we kind of, right, we need some sort of balance with Leanne. She's kind of integrated herself and everything. So like, I think with Sean now, he's kind of like, I don't want Dorothy to be, even though he did say to her, he said like, he's like, our happiness or whatever. But I think for Sean, it's like, he's kind of back in the game. Like Dorothy, even like not Dorothy, but we saw it last episode where Leanne gave him the blessing, go do the show. So I think now for like Sean, it's like, I want to do something for me, because at least because the last two seasons that we've seen, it's always been constantly something like for Dorothy or being distracted, even with Jericho. So on this end, he's like, I want to do, and like even like the whole like going to church thing and bumping into Nancy, that's still like a thing of doing something for Jericho to try to give him some sort of like religion or whatever else it is. But in this case, like, the gourmet gauntlet, it is for him. For him, like there's like this, like I feel like everybody always kind of has a sense of being, like it's what's your place in the world, and there's like different things that are part of it. Sometimes it's being like, maybe some people just want to solely be like a good parent or just have a lot of kids or whatever. Sometimes it's like, it's family and it's work. Some people are just work, and I think with Sean, a lot of it for him has been a little bit neglected of the work side, because he was on his way until Jericho died. He was on his way. He was kind of moving up, and that's still like that parallel, like that's like we're like steps backwards. So now he's kind of getting those opportunities and everything. So like I think he's almost distracted. And he's just kind of like, listen, I want Leanne here to look out over Dorothy and Jericho, because then I can fully concentrate on trying to build this career back that I had prior to not having Leanne in my life. So
Yeah. Well, I think it's also interesting too, because early on in the episode, we see a fight between Sean and Dorothy over, he's like, do I get, I don't get a say in like anything that happens in my son's life. And the end of the episode, it's like, because, we see basically, Dorothy's like, all right, see you later, Leanne, go do your dance thing. Doll Jericho's back. Everybody's freaking out, running around the house. We've got these weird baby cries happening because, you could tell Leanne's manipulating it from right outside the door. And then ultimately, like, Sean is just like, no, Leanne is back. This is how it's going to be. End of story. And it's like the first time we've really seen Sean step up and sort of play that role in any sort of way to Dorothy, who's always usually the one making the decisions, making these declarations. And it's like part of it, I'm sure Dorothy's probably thinking like, why are you doing this? But ultimately we all know he's doing it because he's doing what's best for his family. And he's trying to do something good for Dorothy ultimately, because like, if Leanne goes and this baby goes, like, that's it.
Right. And the way I look at it too, right. And it's as we've kind of seen, or like if I was just kind of just guessing too, that like Dorothy's career is not going the way that it's going. That is a nice house. I don't know how many bedrooms are in that house. I don't know how many bathrooms are in that house, but it is a nice house. I've seen that kitchen. I've seen that stove. I've seen some of that backyard. So like, I want to say that is an expensive house to live in, even if it's 175 years old. I want to say they live probably on like a really posh street. So someone's got to, pay for that upkeep, which also like, I think that's a piece of like, right. Like you were saying, it's like, it's not selfish, but he still wants like the success, and it's for the better of his family. But in order, like Dorothy's kind of like coming down, he's going up. And which also leads me to that weird bog still that's in the cellar.
Right.
And we talked about it last episode, it's just kind of there, and we're like, okay, it's like, does this need repairs or whatever? But in this situation, I mean, like this thing all of a sudden became a character.
Yeah. And then we saw like, even during the sequence when everyone's running around trying to find Jericho, like the house further cracks even more. So there's obviously some sort of bigger force. And it's like, I know it's Leanne manipulating it, but like the one thing I wanted to talk about, like, as we kind of got closer to the end of this show, was that image at the end of her diary of that sort of big figure in the darkness.
The fire, right? That kind of, yeah.
That kind of almost looks like a Metropolis like image, like of like a giant figure, very menacing, like, what the hell is that? Because we haven't seen that yet. Is that something that Leanne knows is coming? Is that something that Leanne can bring about? I'm curious what your theories are, because I'm really fascinated by that image.
Or was it maybe like the image, maybe it was Aunt Josephine when she like burned her? Could that maybe like
maybe
also...
But it looks like it was kind of like out in the world, because it looked like there was sort of some trees and stuff in the photo, and it looked just giant. So it almost looked kind of like this like giant golem figure of some sort. I'm not sure.
Which is really interesting, because like so far, although Leanne has had some definitely supernatural powers, and there's some like maybe at best Wiccan type things, like witches, Wiccan type things going on here. We haven't seen like an actual like supernatural creature yet come into the show. So it's like that's another why, as you're bringing it up, like that picture is really, really mysterious. Also, it's like, how do you incorporate some sort of like supernatural character? And maybe is that what we're building to for the finale in terms of like season 4?
Maybe if season 4 is going to end with like Dorothy and the Wicker Man, where she's like inside this giant figure and then they have to burn her.
Yeah, right. I mean, who knows? So
I'm totally on board to see Knight's version of Wicker Man. I will go for it. So, but I think that's like, again, it's one of these things, like every time we watch an episode, it's like these dynamic shift where I'm like, okay, so I think we're going this direction. It's like, and then this one with all the stuff in the diary, what happens when they're running around the house looking for Jericho, and seeing Leanne, like with her interactions with the kids and like her dance sequence, even when she's dancing around in the basement's reacting to her being there and the feelings that she's feeling in those moments of dance. It's just incredible. And one thing it's like, what I don't understand is like for Leanne, like what is her end game? Is like, is she planning on living with Sean and Dorothy until Jericho's 18 or something? And like,
Well, I want to say like now, she's tried to, because her old family is gone.
Yeah.
Her old family, her old way of life. She talks about her mother, whatever, but clearly like that's like some estranged issue. She's in this new family. And right, I mean, it would be weird, but I think that, she wants to be like the adopted daughter now versus the nanny on some end. So like, yeah, even though she is 18. So yeah, I guess if Jericho decides to be 18, it makes her 36. I don't know if she want to live there her whole life.
Right.
And like that would be interesting to see if we saw like a fast forward, and she's still hanging out or whatever. Or it's like, well, bye, son. We'll see you going off to school, and then all of a sudden it's like, Jericho didn't come to classes today.
Yeah, and then they go to his room and he's a mannequin. Like, I'm just curious how that would work in the long run.
That's another whole interesting version of servant. That would be because I mean, shows have done that. Shows have definitely fast forwarded. To kind of play themselves out. So yeah. that would be another interesting twist to Servant for sure.
Or they end it next season, and then like in 10 years they have a reunion show where like he's off doing school or something, and that's how it goes or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's one of those where I'm just like, for me, like Leanne, like you're 18 years old, you obviously have powers, you can do so many different things. Like, I don't know, maybe there's a little part of me that's evil and wants to go conquer the world a little bit, like give these family their baby and just move on, like, and just kind of go experience the world a little bit, because obviously you can kind of do whatever you want.
It's like what is it really, really, really about family that you have to have your meat hooks into them versus exactly before. And I think and that's the other thing that we're trying to figure out. And like I was saying about like the rules is, where are we in terms of like the percentages of of Leanne's actual power? Is she only like was she only like at like 5%, 10% when we first met her, and now is she at 25%? It's like, is that the whole thing? It's like, you don't want to see, maybe she's like fire starter, you don't want to see her at 100%. It's like, that's the thing. It's like, we don't know right now currently. We know that she's gaining confidence, we know that she has a certain power, we know how quickly her power now works in terms of like if she wants it, and it was talked about in the episode too. So but like, what percentage of her power is she really, really at?
I'm right there with you, because I don't know if this is only like 10% of her power, like, whoo boy, there's a lot to be concerned about, I think, overall. But yeah, I have to say, like, the further we get into this season, just the more excited I am about everything. And as much as I loved episodes 5 and 6, I was just like, this one was, whew, like I almost needed a drink or something afterwards.
because the main thing is that, like, as they opened season 3, and as they closed out season 2, we saw Jericho back. So we really weren't expecting to ever go back to Scary Jerry. Plastic, baby. Like we weren't ever expecting to go back to that. So the fact that they brought that back in, at episode 7 is pretty good. I think that's why you were saying this, and you were like, what in the world is happening here? It's because we thought that we were over that. We thought that part of like that storyline, or just kind of like that, was done. So to see that like Leanne pulls that rug and say, hey, I can still bring him back this way is
definitely. So I'm guessing the next few episodes are going to be just as amped up as this one was. But I'm really excited. It's one of those, like, I've been trying to watch them every week, but I might have to just go ahead and finish the season this week after this one. I'm just like, oh boy, I think I'm going to have to just go for it, because I am completely hooked into where this is all heading. But
I mean, so I think the way to look at it, like the next episode for sure is that, okay, so Sean made a decision. Dorothy's doesn't mean that Dorothy was quite on board. So I think, we're definitely still going to see kind of, okay, now Dorothy hasn't been able to kick Leanne out of the house. So I think that's like what the aftermath is we're going to see, is that like, where does the conflict come in now? Is it Dorothy combating Sean about, dude, I tried to have some version of a solution for Leanne where we weren't just abandoning her, but I was trying to put her into some sort of a program where we knew that she was being looked out for. She was still being, fruitful in her life that has meaning and dance and all these things. And now that's all gone. So like, which way does Dorothy start battling? Does she start battling them both? Is what I'm like kind of looking forward to for like these like last 3 episodes.
Or like, do we end season 3 with Dorothy being locked in the attic and Leanne in control or something?
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past it. It's one of those where I'm just like, who knows? Like, I'm just here for the ride and I'm excited to be on it. And we are clearly in the part of the roller coaster where everything is doing its little flip arounds and swooshies back to side, back and forth. And it's all fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, what I at least do like is the fact that, like, because you bring in a Julian, it's not like that weird kind of cliche thing that happens in real life, unfortunately, sometimes where the nanny becomes like the husband's lover and then the wife is scorned. Like that's why I like at least having the Julian dynamic in there, because clearly, like, we're not going to, I mean, at least from what I gather, we're not going to see that. I know they kind of maybe touched on it at times, maybe throughout the series of this or that, but the fact that Julian's in there and he and Leanne are like, definitely intimate and doing things, it's like that kind of throws like that part of it out. So it makes for a good story for sure to see what's going on going forward.
Yeah. I've always liked the fact that I think Sean's concern for Leanne has come from a genuine place of like empathy and sympathy, as opposed to like something sexual in nature, which is nice.
Because he was home. Yeah, because he was homeless and stuff too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
which we found out this season.
Yeah, and they even talk about a little bit more with the opening of Gourmet Gauntlet. So, which I would completely watch that show. We watch a lot of cooking shows in our house.
They did a good job of making it look like one of those shows that you definitely see. Like they did really good job of
Food Network or something.
That's like completely different than what you would see from the show itself. Like they did a good job of like taking it out of the servant world and putting it like that type of a show. So that was good. That was fun to see right at the beginning.
Yeah, I would definitely watch Gourmet Gauntlet. So if you guys want to do a spinoff on Apple, we would tune in for that. So
hey, everybody's trying to diverse their programming, so maybe we will see that.
That would be super fun, and we should get some credit for that, Apple, if that happens. So. But yeah, so I think that pretty much kind of takes us to the end of this episode. I'm super excited to see where we're heading. Rick, where can everybody find you online and find your work and all that fun stuff?
You guys can find me on all social media at Rick Hong and on HollywoodFirstLook.com. I've got some interviews with the cast of Our Flag Means Death, which is coming out this weekend. And also, the Hollywood Critics Association had their 5th annual awards last night or a couple nights ago. And so you can definitely tune in to go see some of those interviews on our website.
Yeah, absolutely. There was so much talent and things going on there. And you were on the red carpet too. So you were at the forefront of everything for the entire evening. So you were one of our warriors out there, Rick.
a lot of good talent showed up for the award show. So if you guys want to check it out, it's on our YouTube page.
Excellent. And I am Heather Wixson. You can find me on Twitter at The Horror Chick, and you can also find my work over at dailydead.com. And I think I have a new piece going up this week on Fangoria. That's an exclusive look at some of the special effects that went into Studio 666, which is pretty cool and pretty rad and totally over the top. So that's pretty fun to go check out if you're into that sort of thing. But we thank you guys so much for watching. Please feel free to chime in with any of your theories. I mean, we are really getting into the thick of it now. So it's like, I almost feel like I have to start taking notes of other people's ideas. So that way, when we get to episode 10, I feel like we should look at where we've all kind of been throughout this whole season and see if we're anywhere close to where we thought we were going. Because that's the fun of Servant, I think.
Yep. So, is it Team Leanne, Team Dorothy, or is it Team Sean?
Or Team something else at this point, too. You never know. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. And please be sure to head back here next week for another episode of The Servant After Show. Thanks, everybody.